one of the research centers. Most of my research is on nutrition issues and disability issues, and the other half of my time is in the communication department. And I also have two young kids who are scurrying around back here right now. I see one's about to go outside on your break. On his break? All right, he's giving me a thumbs up. I've spent some time teaching Dative at their, well, my daughter's now in middle school, but at elementary school, I've taught Dative there. And since the pandemic, I've taught some virtual classes around the country. I've done a few classes in Florida, a couple in New York. I did one, a fourth grade class in New York last week. Through the Skype a Scientist program or project. I put the link in the Padlet if you're interested in contributing there. They basically hook up elementary school, middle school teachers with scientists around the country, or I guess around the world, and you can come in and give a quick talk. But I'm going to talk about how I've approached teaching Dative to kids in, basically an hour or a 90-minute session, especially for elementary and middle school students. And as Renata mentioned, this is ultimately going to be part of a much larger project that my urban colleague Claire Bowen and I are working on as one of the South Data Hub seed grants. We'll be working on a portal to provide information to teachers and educators on how to teach STEM and data science to kids, especially in the virtual world, which I know many of us can sort of see the end of the tunnel of the pandemic, but I think we can also all agree that the virtual world is here to stay. And so it's going to be a challenge, I think, for lots of people and communities and educators to continue their efforts to teach kids. So let me talk about Dative in general. So, I don't think this is a sort of crazy belief, but a lot of us know our basic charts like bar charts and line charts and pie charts because we learn about them in elementary school. My kids actually get taught histograms, which I think is incredible. But a lot of people, I think one of the challenges of communicating complex data is a lot of people don't know graphs like histograms or scatter plots. And there's lots of other graph types out there that we can use as content creators. And those other graph types, those different types of graphs, we can use because sometimes they are inherently better at showing data. They do a better job of presenting the trends or the patterns or the comparisons. And sometimes those different or alternative graph types are simply engaging. And sometimes we do need, as content creators, to engage our reader or our user to bring them in to the larger website, report, document, whatever it might be. And so I have sort of two goals when I teach kids, or three goals really, is first to expose the kids to different types of graphs. So to get them out of they don't just know line charts and bar charts and pie charts, that they're going to learn about different graph types. So that they can be good data consumers, and ultimately many of them will be data producers when they grow up. The second thing, especially for elementary school age kids, is to have an active physical learning environment. So then to actually do something, I think for anyone, well, we've all been kids. If you can remember, for some of us, remembering back further than others, if you can remember back that long of what it's like to sit in a fourth grade classroom and listen to someone drone on, it's not as comfortable as we may want it to be, and so getting the kids to do something is a way that we can, or that I think we can help the kids learn about data. And then finally, of course, for especially third, fourth, fifth, sixth graders, is to get them to have some fun. And it's just like teaching algebra to kids. You sort of trick them into learning. They, at the end of the day, they are going to have fun, but they've actually learned a lot about data visualization. I'm going to show you how I've done that. So the basic structure of this hour and a half session is, first I talk about data visualization, then we do a drawing exercise, and then when it's in person, obviously I haven't done that in about a year. When it's in person, we have a card game that we play. And I've set up the card game to be sort of a tournament of sorts. So in the virtual world, I just do these first two activities, but I'll talk about this third activity as well today. Okay, so first we talk about the lecture. And again, what I focus on is expanding their graphic literacy. So I'm going to show them a variety of different graphs, but within this confine of having, pretty much about an hour. I'm not going to do a lot of different graphs, but I am going to focus on maps. And I focus on maps for a couple of different reasons. One is that the kids generally are going to recognize maps. They are going to be familiar with how maps work, the sort of general maps, how they work. And so I start with showing them a map of the world. And generally, I'll also say I'm on my Mac today, but in the virtual world, I've been doing this on my Surface Pro, so I can actually draw on the screen. It's a little bit harder with the Mac to do that. But when I show them this map, I start asking them some questions. And again, I'm focusing on the virtual world today. I do this in person too, but circle Australia. I'll circle Australia. What country is this? Circle China. What country is this? Circle some of the smaller countries, maybe countries that I wouldn't expect them to know about, and see how many they can sort of get. And they immediately get engaged with that because this is a familiar visual to them. This is something that they can recognize, and many of them, especially fourth and fifth graders, have learned about this. The last country I focus on is the United States. I haven't taught this outside the U.S. yet, so that would change my approach. But then we focus on the U.S. We focus on do the same sort of exercise, circle some states, see if they can find their state, and then we zoom in to their area. So this is my town of McLean, Virginia. When I've taught this in my kids' elementary school, this is where we focus in. I asked them to identify some areas. My home over here on the right. The elementary school there, and then the Little League ball fields in the bottom right, and then there's a big Tyson's Corner Mall over there on the left. And so and I've done this when I've been doing this virtually for other places. It's really easy to just go get a screenshot of X town, X school in such and such Florida, and bring that up and sort of just look around on the map and find some of these areas, and then ask the kids to identify some of the other areas around their neighborhood. So we've started with the world, we dive into the United States, we then go to the city, or then we go to the state, then we go to the city, and then we talk about their home, that we can actually draw maps of anything. And this is going to be the drawing exercise, and we're going to come back to this in just a little bit. So then I dive into some data-driven maps, and I've tried to use maps that I think are interesting, that will engage them, that will get them to think a little bit. So this is called a dot density map. It has a dot for every graveyard in the United States. There's clearly a sort of yellow glowy area in that Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia area. When you ask the kids, why do you think there's a lot of graveyards there? I'll say pretty quickly, in my experience, they actually figure out that it's the Civil War. That's why you have a lot of graveyards in that particular area of the country. And I've had kids, note that, why is there this glowy area in Connecticut and Rhode Island? And, that's probably due to the Revolutionary War. So they tend to figure it out pretty quickly. The other question that comes out of this map is, why is it so dark in the Rocky Mountain area? And when that question eventually comes up, I flip to this map. This is a map that shows the distance to the nearest McDonald's. And here we can talk about, why are there such bright clusters in the big metro areas of Chicago and New York and Los Angeles, but not so much in that Rocky Mountain area. And we get to talking about, there's just not a lot of people living there. And so, we get to talk about that. I also show them that there are other ways to show maps, that they don't have to be your sort of standard geographic maps. We talk about this one. Now, it's interesting. Every time I've done this class, they all figure out that Colorado, if you can sort of see my cursor here, Colorado's the happiest state. And I hesitate to tell them why they're so happy in Colorado. We haven't legalized marijuana in Virginia yet. But it's not quite appropriate to talk about drug use with the fourth graders. But they all, in every class I've taught, they somehow key on Colorado. Okay, so that's sort of getting them keyed up. I talk about some other graph types, which I won't talk about today, but sort of getting them engaged with these other graphs. And I have some other graph types that I think relate to their experience pretty well. The second part of this is the actual drawing, is the actual exercise. And so what they're asked to do is to draw a map of one floor in their house. So in person, when I do this, I'll bring paper and tracing paper with me. And so I'll hand out the paper to the class, just 8.5 by 11. Obviously virtual, one of the requirements I've had to do with the Skype a Scientist program is to say, the kids are going to need paper and pencils or or colored pencils, and that hasn't been a challenge yet. So the kids all draw their maps. They show them on the screen. We talk about that a little bit, and then I ask them to place some data on the map. And I'll say again, when I'm using my tablet, I'll actually do this exercise first. I'll actually draw a map of my house on the screen so that they can see it. And then they'll start drawing, and I'll prompt them a little bit. You can draw circles for how much time you spend reading or playing video games, or where you walk in the house, or where your pets sit. And then, ask what did they create? And they actually are, they get pretty excited about what they show. And I'll just show some pictures of what the kids created when I was at my son's elementary school in 2019. In the fall of 2019, I did this over there. You can see that with the tracing paper, they actually, they get pretty into this, and they get excited about all the drawing, and they're pretty smart and pretty clever about what they draw. And you see, we actually in this one classroom, we had a lot of things that they drew: the time, how much they liked the room, where they use their computer, their iPad, where they played, where they walk, rooms they don't go in. I'm sorry, I'm reading this for you because it's my handwriting and it's just admittedly awful. How much fun they have, how do they get to each room, how do they feel in each room. Recently, the last class I did this for last week, there was a bunch of kids who had dogs, and so a lot of them did different shapes and colors about where the dogs ate, where the dogs slept, where they, where the dogs, where they hung out with the dogs. So they do get pretty engaged with this project, because one of the advantages of maps is that we can see ourselves in the data. We can see, I live in Virginia, I can see Virginia in the map, and they can see this very specifically when you're talking about, give me a map of of a floor in your house. And then the final project, when this is in person, is to play a game. And I have a data visualization card game on my website, and I'll link to that in just a moment. But it's basically, if anyone has played Spot It, it's basically a version of Spot It. You have multiple graphs on each card, and the game is to just identify the matches of the different graph types. And so what I do is I give each kid, they get their own deck that they can take home. They get their own deck. They spend about 5 or 10 minutes trying to learn about the different graph types. And again, this is very quick. So they don't actually know, what a violin chart is necessarily representing, or what a chord diagram is representing, but they start to get familiar with the language. And you can see here that, thanks, Carl. I'll put the link to the card game in just a moment. And you can see that I set up a March Madness sort of tournament last time, and they play this game. And my kids aren't allowed to play it because we play it at home too much, so they're not allowed to play. They beat their friends. The last thing I'll just mention is we did have a proposal right at the end of right before the pandemic started to actually do an evaluation of this learning sequence that we were going to do in the spring of 2020 at my kids' elementary school. But of course, once things closed down, we weren't able to do it. But basically, we had this evaluation that we were going to do we're going to teach 3 separate classes, 4th or 5th grade classes. And in one set of classes, we were going to do a lecture and a multiple choice quiz of different types of graphs. In another class, we were going to do a lecture, a matching exercise. So they were going to get a piece of paper with a graph on one side and the name on the other. And then they were going to get the mapping exercise and then a quiz. And then the third class, they would get this other combination. And we were going to do a quiz that day and then come back a few weeks later. And we actually had an agreement in hand with the principal of our school. And then the pandemic happened and everything sort of shut down. But this is still in the back of my head. So something that hopefully we'll be able to do in probably 2022, which would be fun to really see how this works. So again, our goals here were to expose the kids to different graph types. We wanted to make it active and physical, which we did, drawing the map and playing this game, and of course having fun. And then the activities, the basic activities were to have this lecture, then this drawing exercise, and then the card game. And then later on, we would have these additional exercises that we'd have the kids do. So I am going to just pop this quote in here from Fanny Chevalier and her colleagues about developing data visualization literacy. And again, the way that people become good data viz and data consumers and producers is they learn about these different graph types and different ways of working with data. And so that's what we're trying to do here and get this started right in an early age. So I will stop there and hand the screen back to Renata. And thank you so much. Renata, you're muted.
Unmute. Okay, I hit it. I said, thank you so much, John. There was a lot of interest in the chat about the game, the name of it, and the link to where you could get it. So if you put that in the chat, we'll put it in the Etherpad, or if you put it directly in the Etherpad, that'd be great. There may also be questions over there for it. I know that this is a piece of kind of larger projects of whether you see the game, match it. If you could talk about that a little bit, and if there's a question in the Etherpad, Kendra, if you could let us know as well.